All right, everybody, it is time for another Retroactive Trio podcast. And before we start, I do want to apologize for running late. That was completely my fault. I just got back into town, but luckily, here we are once again to provide an awesome episode full of debate, full of discussion, and of course, we want to hear what your thoughts are, our awesome audience. So, let's go ahead and do our usual roll call. I am your patient zero, Zombie JLT1.
I am Richard Ryan.
And although we are down one BFG tonight, we are still the Retroactive Trio because we have with us an awesome friend and YouTuber, and that is Chris Wackeroni himself. Welcome to the show.
Hey, happy to be here. I'm excited.
Awesome. Now, for those of you who don't really know what you all are all about, Whacker, why don't you give our audience a little breakdown of who you are and what your interests are and what you are looking forward to discussing tonight with us?
Well, I'm a big movie fan, especially like current nerdy stuff. I love comic books and I love comic book movies. And although I was born in the 80s and grew up in the 80s, I don't remember a lot about the older movies. But I think I'm here for more of the modern comic book silliness and maybe explaining that. I collect Dragon Ball stuff. I'm a big Dragon Ball fan. And yeah, just a big old nerd.
Well, you are definitely in the right place because I think a lot of us here at Retroactive Trio and those of us joining in the audience are big nerds ourselves, so you are definitely in good company.
Hell
Uh,
yeah.
Before we start, anybody want to announce any awesome pickups, any interesting news we should know about? Any good deals out there that anybody has found?
I picked up the latest Kirby one. Um, what's the open world one? I already forgot the name. Kirby's. Yeah, I couldn't tell you.
It's all good. It's all good.
I think
Whacker,
the last
anything?
thing I think the last thing I picked up was a $50 giant Broly statue.
Hey, you know what? I'll back that play. Broly's one of my favorites, and it took this damn long for him to be canon. Come on, that's bullshit. Oh, that's another rant for another day, though. I have not had any luck this week yet, but the weekend is still young, so hopefully I'll find some of those good deals that people are mentioning. Ryan, was that a local Target that you shared with me the other day that had Battle Cats for $7?
No, I seen it on Twitter, but I believe it because the every Target I go to always has Battle Cats, like 5, 6 in stock. So I would think if one honors it, another does, but maybe that's not the case.
Hmm, that's an interesting point. I wonder if they do honor that because I know that when the big hype about One Up Arcades was happening during the Christmas season, I went to every Walmart I could go to and I was like, "Hey, this other store has this for this price." And they're like, "Well, they're another store." Is what I was constantly told.
One
So,
thing's for sure, whatever a toy manufacturer thinks they need to make more of is almost always wrong because they're always overstocked with that and don't have enough of something else. Like how many times is that the case? Like with the He-Man line, you had like 800 of like a She-Ra or something, and like none of another. So they always seem to guess wrong, and I wonder why that is.
you would think that the ratio would be the same. Like for every He Man they put out a Battle Cat, you'd think they would try to keep it more balanced that way, but I don't make those decisions, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen a huge price drop like that lately. I'm hoping that the rest of where I'm at will catch up soon because damn, if that's really what they're selling for, then it would just be worth it to pick up some in like maybe have a few in stock, maybe open one, keep the rest sealed or what have you. Plus, there's a lot of toy collectors in my area, so I'm sure somebody would love to own one of those if they don't yet.
What's funny about Target too, and just to before we get on too much of a tangent here, is when you buy something at sale, I've returned something before and not trying to scam anything, but they give me the original price and store credit. So it's kind of crazy. Like I ended up returning something I got on sale for like 12 and they gave me 30 in store credit. Like so it's like there's weird stuff like that that happens too.
Mm-hmm.
Where they give you where you return something and they give you the original price, not the sale price.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what their policies are on that kind of thing, but I know I have been robbed of discounts before, and I want to think that maybe it just has something to do with the stores being independently owned as opposed to being, all part of the same thing. But who knows? Who knows? But uh,
BF, sorry, interject real quick. BFG lives very close to me, and he's been to my local places, the little novelty shops that do that stuff. And he says he doesn't like the way they do things. But I don't go there for video games. I go there for for like comics and toys and stuff.
hey, whatever's your interest, right? That's what we like to support here at the Retroactive Trio. We all, for the most part, tend to like the same thing, but we also have our disagreements too. So that's just part of the fun. What fun would it be if we all agreed on, what we thought the best movies and games and toys were? That'd be no fun.
Well, that's a good point you said that because like I'll go to GameStop sometimes, and there aren't as many toy collectors that hit that place because they're just stocked to the brim of like Marvel Legends and Star Wars Black Series. Whereas if you looked in like a Walmart or Target, it's wiped out. So like sometimes going to a game store is kind of clutch for getting toys because people are more looking for games.
Uh huh. Yeah, I guess it really does vary on what part of the world you're in because all my stores, regardless, all get hit for just about everything. NECA figures, action figures, video games. Whenever there's a sale of any kind, or whenever they get that insider advice, they definitely hit up those stores, and it doesn't even matter what it is. It doesn't even matter if it's something they actually collect. They just know it's going to be a hot ticket. So but we kind of let loose on that whole scene just last week with the whole scalpers suck movement, but it definitely has not changed my mind at all.
You suck!
So,
Very true.
Scalpers suck.
yep. All right. So, on today's topic, the 80s action stars of the day versus our lovely MCU of today.
Not necessarily just MCU.
Yeah, well, there's DC, but I could care less.
Womp womp womp. By the way, while we have this picture up, can we all pick? We all got to have a favorite here. I got to go with Arnold, man.
Arnold
just knocked it out the park in the 80s.
Arnold for sure. Arnold was my go-to guy. I used to imitate more of his movies as a kid than anybody else.
Yeah, Arnold's the guy. I mean, he's just got more star power per capita, Like he's just a whole bunch of movies just cranking them out.
Mm-hmm. And I think that was, I guess you could kind of say that's what the Marvel Cinematic Universe has kind of done, although it's more so for canon and continuity than it is because that happens to be the hot actor at the time. Like
Sure.
none of Arnold's movies, with the exception of obvious sequels, connect in any way. But because he was the guy, you had to put him in everything. And the same could be said for Stallone and all of our greats here. And as we all know, not everything that they starred in were box office hits. Some were flops. Some became cult classics. Which I think in many ways is a much more significant title than being, a summer blockbuster or whatever, because blockbusters come and go, but the cult status, I think, is what either gives a movie new life or keeps it going, so to say.
just looking at this wallpaper here, though. I mean, what are you're just struck with the full on macho, roided out nature of the action star of the '80s, right? Today we got more of a svelte figure that's more in demand, right? Even with the superhero movies, like it's not nobody's as huge. It's almost like our action stars had to be like WWF wrestlers back in the day, right? That was the kind of caliber we held
I
them
mean, they
to
were
as
all
actors.
actors.
Yeah.
I feel like almost like there's more of them today. Like more people are in the acting worlds. Like we had these were the guys because they were the only guys that could pull off some of these roles, you know.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have like way more actors. Just I don't know.
But isn't it kind of interesting that where, you know, back then when you look at a lot of these actors, a lot of them started in rated R movies. Isn't it insane that we had family members that would love to take us to things like that or to rent these on those Friday, Saturday nights and not really give a fuck about it? It was more so like you could actually um cheer along with the adults watching these movies. Like whenever we would watch, a Rambo film, it didn't matter if it was violent, it didn't matter if it was rated R. Everybody came together, including my grandparents, and we would all sit there and be like, "Yeah, fuck shit up." As a kid, I couldn't get away with saying that, but being allowed to actually root for the hero and be pumped up like everybody else, I kind of miss that. I feel like that's lacking in a lot of movies of today. Now we might go crazy when we're all there for the big MCU release, but it kind of loses its appeal after a while. I feel like the energy is there for one particular day, maybe two at best, and then it's gone. I remember in my household there were more crowd pops there than there were in theaters at the time. So I guess MCU films and 80s action films go hand in hand in that way, but I definitely feel that the audience base is a lot different.
Oh yeah, I can speak on that a little bit. If your parents or grandparents or whoever were watching those movies with you, you could both enjoy them for whatever reason. But these days, if I want my 60-year-old mom to go, to the movies with me, she doesn't want to watch some of this weird cartoony Marvel stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, see, Dad Level Podcast is chiming in. My dad was that type of person. A lot of my relatives really were. The women went nuts for obviously the sculpted bodies. I don't know how many times we had to watch the opening scene in Terminator when Arnold shows up naked because one of my relatives had a hard on for him.
Uh,
Um, and the women would cheer the guys and their physiques, and the guys would cheer all the explosions and the gunshots and everything, and it was just like one big massive frat party that everyone was invited to. It was such an awesome ritual in many ways.
I was always trying to uh, like bring newer comic movies to my dad to see what he thought of them, and he liked most of them, but like still when it gets too cartoony and silly, he's not into it. I'm sure he liked a lot of the old '80s action stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, James Bond is one that I don't know if is mentioned here, but and Jackie Chan, like let's not forget Jackie Chan was a badass in like everything he did.
Oh yeah. And he even got elevated because he was known for doing his own stunts, where most of these guys had, stuntmen that they worked with regularly. I know Arnold, for many years, worked with the same guy. And as a matter of fact, in probably my second favorite film of his, which is Predator, I have to put Terminator above just slightly. Um, you can actually see the stuntman that works for Arnold and with Arnold in that movie. He's actually one of the Russian soldiers that gets blasted through a wall with a grenade. That's actually his stunt double, and they worked together for years on films. The same can be said about Jackie Chan. He was in Enter the Dragon, probably his most well-known role with Bruce, and Bruce was so impressed by how not only Jackie made Bruce look, but just Jackie's ability to take those hits and make everything look so damn believable that he actually wanted Jackie on more of his movies. I don't know how that rumor started that they hated each other, but that has never been verified in any way. It's always been the opposite. Jackie and Bruce loved working with each other.
If we're speaking strictly 80s action, James the James Bond of that time was it Dalton?
Uh, yeah, I think Dalton Lazenby, possibly. I'm not too fresh on a lot of the on my Bond trivia, but we'll go with that. We'll say that.
I think I sort of connected with Pierce Brosnan in like two of his versions of those movies for some reason.
Mm-hmm. And everybody has their favorite Bond too. Like Connery will always be my favorite, but Roger Moore I think was also a great Bond too.
Watched a bunch of those old Bonds with my dad a long time ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the same with me and my grandfather. We gravitated towards science fiction films, which is why he loved watching Aliens, Predator, The Thing. But he had his fair share of 80s action movies. He loved Clint Eastwood. He loved Charles Bronson. Um, when any of those were on, he would definitely get glued to his chair with a six pack and just say, "Leave it there." You know, we're not watching anything else. And the same for his Godzilla movies too. I got into Godzilla because of my grandfather. Um,
That word sort of lies where my argument of liking a lot of the newer stuff would be, is that it's easier to do sci-fi now that you don't have to rely on practical effects, which are much more difficult, and you can do a large scope, galactic space magic stuff. I feel like you can. It's easier to do, and you can see more, and it feels more giant and epic. Where back then everything had to be practical, and the stuff that wasn't practical didn't look very good.
I think in some cases, I mean, some of the effects were kind of obvious, but they still had enough charm to them that you could still appreciate what they were attempting to do. Now, there are some perfect examples. Jurassic Park is always my go-to on this, where practical effects and CG were so perfectly blended that when you can't even tell what's what, that is special effects well achieved in my opinion. And even some
Yeah.
of these 80s explosions and they're over the top, you know, uh grenades and missiles going off, and even some of the 80s sci-fi practical effects still hold up to this day. I mean,
Some
there's
of them,
there's
yes.
no
Like,
comparison to that.
yeah, some of them, like Alien and Predator and Jurassic Park, and yeah, like a lot of that stuff does hold up. The Thing, I don't know if we'll talk about the things that's more like sci-fi or thriller or something, but I mean that was perfect practical effects.
Well, one
Mm-hmm.
of the examples I'd give to how limited we were in the 80s for putting a superhero movie, really bringing it to life, was to me, and I hate to hit on these because Christopher Reeves looked really nailed the part and looked, he looked great, but the effects in the the Superman movies just haven't aged well, and how those look. And I mean, you want to look at a comparison of how far we've come. I gotta hand it to the superhero movies of today. They just take it that whole nother level. Like Wacker said, creating the universe so much more believable. Because you would see some of the action scenes in the Superman movies, you know, and it would just take you out of it. It was very cheeseball, you know.
When they're hanging on strings, when he catches the helicopter,
Yeah,
in Superman 2, the old Richard Donner, whatever the hell, like he's on strings. It looks goofy. But like I
Right.
actually like that movie, and a lot of that is a difference between the director and the studio and the writer. Like not all the new stuff is gonna be great, just like all the old stuff wasn't all great, because like it depends on whether or not it's an actual good movie. Like, no, we're not all going just to see, a CGI fest.
But wouldn't you say that the scope in which someone goes to see a movie is different than what it used to be in the 80s? Like, remember how we used to be able to say things like, "Oh, that's a Schwarzenegger movie," or "That's a Stallone movie." We didn't really care what the rest of the movie was kind of going to be about. It was all about who was headlining it. You don't see
Hmm.
that with a lot of movies of today, especially the MCU ones. Like, you might
Yeah.
say, "Oh, well, it's a Spider-Man movie or it's a Thor movie," but unless you really know who's behind that character, it doesn't matter.
I could argue like Ryan Reynolds. If you're a fan of Ryan Reynolds, then you're gonna love Deadpool. Or
Mm-hmm.
like if you're a fan of Paul Rudd, you might watch Ant-Man.
Yeah, that's true. If you're an unfortunate fan of Green Lantern, I mean, I can't help you, but I was more intrigued to see that movie because I think Ryan Reynolds did a good Hal Jordan. I think his lines were horribly written and deviated from the character. But I'm also a little biased because I'm not the biggest DC fan, so maybe that movie wasn't written for me. But
I think
I
I think
enjoyed
Green.
it because of Ryan Reynolds.
Huh, it's interesting. Yeah, maybe. I was okay with it. I mean, it's not a good movie, but I enjoyed it for the most part, sort of.
And that's a perfect example of where CGI just looked horrendous, I think.
They kind of dropped the ball on that one.
Yeah, for sure.
I want them like, why aren't they doing a new Green Lantern? It's such an interesting character. Like they should do a new one. I don't mean the character. I mean the Green Lantern universe. There's so much to draw from for stories and stuff.
Right. Like, they could do a
So
sequel if they wanted to. I just don't know if they're going to, if they're actually going to do it. Oh man, ODG
yeah, where
mentioning
does
the
Star Wars fit?
Eternals. Ugh.
Where, I was thinking, where does Star Wars fit in? Like old dirty gamer says, that's a good point.
Mhm.
Sci-fi fantasy. Sure, if it.
I would say sci-fi fantasy for sure.
Because Star Wars to me would be almost the strongest argument you could make of practical effects and sets versus green screen, because you know the stuff looked amazing that Lucas was able to do,
Yeah.
and with a lot of those miniatures and what they were doing, you know, that actually does hold up. So whereas I felt like Superman movies didn't, Star Wars was so ahead of its time. It was proving it was. You could be done back then.
I
I
think
agree.
I think that part of what goes into that mix is whether a film is backed by a Hollywood budget or if it's an independent film. Because we have seen movies that started out with independent companies or franchise or whatever you want to call it. Like Nightmare on Elm Street was the movie that launched New Line Cinema, an independent, personally ran studio. And Nightmare on Elm Street was done on a low budget. It's practically an independent film, and it rose to Hollywood stardom with practical effects, some of which don't age well, but for the most part they do. Halloween is an independent horror film that kind of either launched or relaunched, depending on how you look at it, the slasher genre.
Wonder if I
So
could go. Sorry, go ahead.
I think it has a lot to do with who's behind the camera and who's behind those effects.
Well, if we go back and touch on Star Wars just real quick, even though that's not really what we're talking about, but the first few Star Wars movies, I loved them. It's all mostly practical and all that. And then the when they started doing the prequels, they were just so heavy on the CG that they lost me. Like trying
Yeah.
all of like all of those movies looked like a giant green screen to me.
Well, they were for the most part. They went from making miniatures and sets to green screen with maybe some minor part of the set built. You know, they were all in a sound studio with bunch of green screen everywhere, and then you had the actors interacting with some part of the set, not all of it.
You know, to compare and contrast the two, looking here at this at the screen right now, what I feel like the '80s represented in some ways was the everyman. Look at Kurt Russell. Look at Bruce Willis. I mean, you could picture kind of putting yourself in their shoes in those movies. They were not. They were kind of like the everyman. Okay, like Rambo was like the disenfranchised war veteran, right?
Mm-hmm.
Arnold in Commando was like a guy, out getting revenge. It's like you could kind of, whereas the superhero movies, they're straight based off the comics. There's something to be said about you know or like say Mel Gibson Lethal Weapon movies. He was a guy kind of with mental health issues, like, right, he's suicidal, his wife died in the movie. I mean, you had kind of these everyman kind of characters, even though they were action stars, right? And there was a relatability to that with these '80s stars that I think. And he like take somebody like Eddie Murphy in Beverly Hills Cop. He's kind of like a fish out of water kind of thing, right? He's like a guy from the city. He's thrown into L.A. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so it's kind of like there was a certain relatability to the '80s action stars, whereas today it's more like a fantasy. You lose yourself in it through the superhero characters, much less about your everyman kind of person.
Right.
I can agree with that, but I would also say it's every man. Every single one of them was a man. You don't get to see the female action hero.
Well,
That's a good point.
yes and no. I think
There was
because
Supergirl, right? Wasn't there Supergirl?
oh, that movie was terrible. um, I mean, the best example of an '80s female action star, Sigourney Weaver, Ellen Ripley.
Oh yeah.
Of course, yeah, yeah, but
You know, I think
not as many,
not
obviously.
not as many, not many recognizable women action stars, but there were some. I think they just get drowned out by the massive testosterone here, um, that was heavily marketed towards us and heavily presented. As a matter of fact, ODG reminding us of Red Sonja, Bridget Nielsen. Yeah, she starred in that movie alongside Arnold Schwarzenegger, who should have been Conan, but that wasn't his character. Um, it should have been, but that's not what they wrote.
I
Um,
gotta say too, like as a kid, I didn't watch like Sesame Street or something and want to be like, even as a young kid, like I didn't. I looked up to like these action stars, man, like because
oh,
I felt like
absolutely.
I probably shouldn't be watching it, but I did anyways, and my dad would sneak me into like PG-13 and R-rated movies. I wanted to be fucking Indiana Jones. I wanted to be Arnold. I wanted to be Mel Gibson and Lethal Weapon. Like they were so fucking cool.
To this day, I want to jump off of an exploding skyscraper attached to a fire hose. Yippee ki yay,
Yeah.
motherfuckers! I still want that moment, you know. Yeah, it's part of. I mean, some people could say that they glorified brutality, they glorified the military and all that, and maybe to some extent that's true. Dad Level Podcast shouting out Sarah Connor, absolutely agree with that one too, especially in T2 when she came into her own as that badass soldier. Um, there was like an awe aspect to a lot of these movies, a lot of these action scenes. And if it wasn't wanting to be the actor or the character, it was just wanting to have that moment, wanting to be a part of that just awesome scene that we just witnessed and say, damn, that's cool. I wish that was me.
Much like the superhero movies of today, all these characters were the underdogs, so to speak, right? The odds were stacked against them of succeeding. I mean, even like look at like Indiana Jones, what he went through in those movies. I mean,
I was
it's
just about
crazy.
to, I was about to speak on that, on what you just said, Ryan. That the a lot of these new comic heroes are underdogs. You know, like Ant Man was just a regular dude, and Captain America started out as a regular dude. Like most of them did have like tragic backstories, or they were like an everyman sometimes.
That's a good point. and it gives the viewer something to strive for, an inspirational tale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We sat there, and while we lived our world, our lives in the cartoon world, we also lived in the action movies of the 80s too. So it was kind of like a good mix of fantasy and reality, even though 80s action movies weren't that realistic, so to say, but real enough that we kind of felt like we could do that one day. That could be us, because you never know.
Yeah.
And like the superhero movies of today, there was always a good versus evil kind of vibe to the
Right?
storyline, right? Whether it's like in the Rambo movies where they take kind of like a throwback war veteran kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually like either like Russia or Germans like were painted as like the villains in a lot of these movies. Part of it's like like based on news stuff at the time, the Soviet Union splitting. Like so. I mean, there's a lot of parallels here that we could compare, even though they feel like so removed from each other, right? The '80s action movies from superhero movies today, there is a lot of common ground, and like Wacker pointed out, the underdogs are still there in the movies today.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Also, I think what I think what also tends to happen with a lot of these modern movies nowadays is the the characterization, the relationships that the characters have with one another. I feel like the 80s movies felt like there was more at stake um, than most modern action movies or most
Hmm.
comic book movies, because we kind of almost expect certain heroes to get hurt or to die if they're
Yeah,
following a particular line. So it's no real surprise. But even with 80s movies that I have seen over and over and over again, I still feel for the characters when I see those moments. I can't
yeah,
really say I have that with a lot of comic book movies. I can't really say that when I watch them, I feel that same emotion that I did when I first saw it. Heroic scenes, like, sometimes give or take, it depends on what the movie is. But with most of my 80s films, the feeling never goes away.
Well, I,
I
I
guess would a present day one Whacker be? When Iron Man dies, you could feel that in the theater.
well, yeah,
I was
there's a
literally,
lot to be felt, but I
I was
want to touch. I
literally
want
hearing
to touch on it
people
before. Sorry, go ahead.
crying in the theater during that.
I wanted to touch on the whole villain thing, the bad guy thing. Also, like in the '80s, bad guys were bad guys. You don't relate to the bad guy. Like all the villains today have to be relatable, and we have to understand where they're coming from. Back then, it was just like, this is the bad guy. We have to
Yeah,
defeat the bad guy.
good point. Fair point.
But I think
They
also
they
that
didn't have a
hurts the
lot of
film.
substance to them. They were evil for evil's sake a lot of times. They were, and I would argue they were stereotypical villains, almost without, like, think of the typical terrorist in True Lies, right? I know they took some heat for that movie because of their depiction of like Muslims in that movie, right? They took some heat for how Cameron depicted, these terrorists. Why are they always Muslims in the movie? Why are they always the evil? So it was a little bit stereotypical the way they made the villains in the action movies sometimes in the '80s and '90s.
We have to
Well,
keep
even
in
in the
mind.
comics. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Whacker. I've been interrupting you.
uh, the comic book Thanos, possibly from the '80s, didn't have the same motivation as the movie version.
Oh,
They just sort of gave him this different motivation for wanting to save humanity. He was just doing it in his own fucked up way, you know.
oh, don't
Whereas
even
in the
mention it.
comics, he was just sort of evil.
Right. That's kind of my biggest beef with Thanos, the way that he's portrayed. Um, Knowing what I know about the comics, about the video games, about the cartoons he was depicted in, Thanos was not a sympathetic villain. You know, as Dad Level Podcast puts it, he was in love with death. Yes, he was a destructive monster. He would not give a shit if he had to sacrifice his daughter to get a stone. He'd have done it without even thinking twice. It would have been Tuesday. So the way that they portrayed him in comparison to the comic book, I threw up in my mouth. Um, and that's kind of where I'm at with a lot of these comic book movies. I can sit here and pick out a particular role with every one of these guys here and say which ones I love to death, which ones I might not be fans of, but ultimately I still like the character. With Marvel movies or with DC movies, I don't find myself really doing that. I might think that an actor pulled off a role, but how they're written, how they're portrayed, I can't always get behind just because the film wants me to, you know.
Actually, that's a big point that really bothers me about newer movies. That they're not following the source material well enough, and it feels like the studio feels like they have to do their own special thing. I don't know why, but
Mhm.
like you can't follow the original material because you have to be special and different or something. It bothers
Mm-hmm.
me.
Right. And I had a talk with one of my uncles today about this said subject. He's also a big comic book fan. We were both into anime, comics, all that stuff, you know, tied together. And he said the same thing. He said his issue with a lot of these comic book movies is that they are taking way too many liberties with characters and their backgrounds to the point where it's almost like you're trying to sanctify these characters. And especially since Marvel is now under Disney's label, they're also trying to make them more goody two shoes and kind of blind the audience from what these characters really are about. And his best example was Tony Stark. Tony Stark was a rich, abusive asshole that it took years for people to like him, not only as Tony Stark, but as Iron Man. But we didn't show that really in the movies. We showed him as, you know, he was a playboy, he was arrogant at best, but the real Tony Stark is much more than that.
I think they did that the best in the very first one, where Tony Stark realized that what he was doing was wrong, and at a certain point, like he was a spoiled, horrible, warmongering person, uh, rich guy, but then he learned that he was, he shouldn't be doing what he was doing, and then he became a little bit more righteous.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna run to the restroom. I'll be right back.
Fair enough. Um, I'm trying to think of another character that we did. Oh, um, one of my favorite examples is Hank Pym, the first Ant Man, who is not even mentioned at all, really, in Age of Ultron, yet he was one of the founding creators of Ultron. So, why couldn't they make reference to him then? We get the Ant Man movies eventually with the second Ant Man, and Hank Pym is in that movie, but there's no mentioning of his alcoholism, how he used to beat Janet, how he felt insignificant to other Avengers or other heroes, and that's why he went through so many name brandings. So it's like they don't want to show us the character as a whole in many ways. They want us to just like only the good things about them and hide the rest. So that's kind of where I am with some of the hero tellings of today. Yeah, that's a good point. That level, but I think that's also part of the problem. They're kind of picking and choosing across the Marvel universes like it's a salad bar. They're taking what they want and they're leaving the rest. And we're not getting portrayals that are as identical or close enough to the original concepts like they should be. I feel like that's a much more valid way to tell an origin story than it is just to kind of sugarcoat or glance over things and then just focus on when our character decides to make that choice to be a hero, you know?
Sure. I got one for you. What the animated comic book movies of today wouldn't have been possible to look as good back then. They could take those old 80s action stars and make animated things out of them today, but back then it would have looked terrible when they did that. So like today it's better to have like animated, and they're able to follow the storylines better in like the animated stuff.
But I think that's where some of these potential movies that could be good suffer because they drop the ball mid translation. My this same uncle, for example, said that he did not like Morbius, whereas I felt like the movie could have been better. I felt like had they had a bigger budget, maybe had better storytelling, that movie could have been a good one. But his biggest issue was he felt like there were two different directors, two different cinematographers, many different writers with
Yes.
no clear grasp on how to tell this character's story.
Of course. And Sony doesn't really know what they're doing. And it feels like a lot of studio interference. And it feels like they had cut things and reshot things because of some type of I don't know, it really just felt like they didn't know what they were doing. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen. Morbius is okay, but it's a Sony movie and they don't really know how to do this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Because
You know,
I told him I like the Venom movies, but they could have been so much better.
Great.
some of the structure of these super. I'm trying to think of like what grows old with me because I go in from watching the trailer with great anticipation and maybe too much anticipation of what I expect it to be, and I'm kind of just pleased but not impressed a lot of times. But I think back to like the first Avengers movie, the hype, right? You felt the hype for that. It delivered. I think I grew a little weary over so many releases, and I get that they're building the story over time, but it starts to feel like you're getting hit with the same program, right? You start the movie, you get your little mini battle in the beginning, you get your dialogue, you get your mid battle, and then it comes to this epic orgasmic conclusion finale fight fest, fuck fest in the end, right? It
Mm-hmm.
starts to feel like you get that same movie program every time, you know. So I think that it's like with the Marvel Universe thing, I went in really enjoying it. I think I got kind of I lost my enthusiasm going on. I think I picked up some with the Infinity War, the two part. I liked it. I liked that they had the superhero's fate kind of hanging in the air. You had to wait. You know, you gotta turn back time to fix things with the gems and all that. Like I liked it that arc. Finally, there is something at stake, right? I did enjoy that. So
There is a formula. They know what makes money, but not all of them are like that.
I guess I felt like it started strong, ended strong. I got a little weary in the middle. So many releases, maybe not all of them great. I know Captain America: Winter Soldier. I think that was another one of my favorite ones. So there were high benchmarks along the way, but I
Well,
just
okay. I knew it
consist.
was gonna. I knew it was gonna be end up being me and Ryan just sort of battling a little bit, and I can say to that point that The newer stuff made me like these characters that I never cared about. And even if they tried to do them back in the 80s, they were bad. They couldn't do the characters, right? Like, because, everything wasn't there. So, like, I actually do care about Captain America and Iron Man and Thor now. And even as a comic fan, I didn't care about them.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because you had your favorites.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's part of the relevancy of our 80s action films. We had our favorites. We had our superheroes brought to life this exact way. When you look at Indiana Jones, he's not a superhero, but he is a hero in many ways. And it's believable because, like Ryan said, he was an everyman. He was adventurer by night and professor by day. So you could kind of see how that could be a possibility for somebody who was really motivated by a character like Indiana Jones.
That was as good as they could do back then for a hero. Like, those were as super as a hero could be because they didn't either chose not to or didn't have the ability to do the stuff that they can do today.
Or
Like,
because
make comic books more realistic, because back then they couldn't do it at all.
or because the audience didn't care for them until the trend started.
Yeah, maybe.
Because
So
we did have comic book movies. We had The Punisher with Dolph Lundgren. We had Captain America, Reb Brown. We had The Shadow, Alec Baldwin. There's so many different comic book movies that came out, but none of them were as successful as a lot of these 80s movies here. It took, I believe, Blade for that to happen.
and I can tell you just like it's yesterday. The comic book boom in the mid '90s, and I was buying up, like Image comics like crazy. Like I appreciated, like, you know, in my collection I have everything from like Uncanny X-Men to Spider-Man to, X-Force to X Factor, but like it, I loved like the kind of that shift that, maybe it was more flash than substance, but like I loved like Image coming out with the double page artwork. They just give you, and that had never happened before. They're doing like a 2-page picture for that they illustrate, and it's versus just cells, little cells, right? Like that we had that standard for so long. It was like a rock star movement, right? With all the Image comics, those creators branching out from Marvel and DC, right? It was a cool time, and I remember wanting nothing more than these movies we're getting today to be coming out then, but they couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And we were getting like Spawn in theaters, and that shit that wasn't there. I mean, and it was okay, but it wasn't there.
That was like writing and director and stuff like that. That could work today.
Oh yeah.
Well, I mean, that wasn't an 80s. Spawn wasn't really 80s, but like they could do it today with better writers and better actors or directors or whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
And I
We've been
remember
discussing
like
that in the chat.
I can remember, like how much I loved the X-Men animated series, and then Hugh Jackman might have killed it as Wolverine, but those first 3 X-Men movies, they weren't quite there yet then either. Like they are now with the Marvel universe. And I remember being a little bit disappointed by those too. So I have this track record with superhero movies being, I'm impressed by some things and disappointed by others. I don't know. It might be my fault. I can blame myself. Maybe my expectations are too high. Maybe it's too much to live up to the source material. Maybe it's, they can't, a budget can never be big enough to do everything in one film.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel it's easy to Wacker. It's interesting that he'll review each one of these superhero movies, and it's important because it's easy to get lost along the way. You have so many branching out characters, different origin stories, and then you got there's so much branching. It's easy to get lost in the whole universe of it. And it is a difficult thing to tie all that shit together at the end of the day, like they did. So I give them credit for that in scope, right?
It's
But
impossible to tie those comic storylines together.
yeah, I just feel like what I see sometimes doesn't live up to what my imagination hoped it could be. Whereas when I like say Batman 1989, that movie, like, I can watch it like 50 times. I love the sets. I'm just in awe of just the action scenes and just the Batmobile and just how Burton just fucking killed it. It looks just like a comic and looks just like a comic sometimes in kind of like ways that maybe somebody would say is outdated now, but for me it was so perfect the way he did it. Or even in like Dick Tracy in the movie, like the way they did the makeup on those characters,
Yeah,
it
it's
felt
beautiful.
like a throwback, you know, and a throwback that I loved though. So part of me likes that kind of dated but practical set look, and maybe that dates me. Maybe I'm outdated for liking
I
that.
like it too. It's sometimes when it's really obvious, like where there's it's fake sets and practical effects and stuff, I like it. Sometimes it works really good. But also keep in mind, like I didn't start enjoying movies until I was older. Like when I was little, I didn't, like a couple of movies, but I didn't watch all these 80 ones that you guys are talking about. Like I know of them and I have watched some of them, but I didn't really get into movies till I was a bit older, which is why I like when things look a little more crisp and there are new actors and new ideas and special effects and stuff.
Right. I was scared like watching Batman and Batman Returns like on Blu-ray because it's like I'm like, is this gonna hold up now? Like, am I gonna see things I don't want to see, and they're gonna look cheap or fake now? No, it almost enhanced it even more. And like some people say, like they'll be critical of like Keaton as Batman. Uh, they'll be like, he looks so stiff in that suit, and like maybe like suits have come a long way, like how they're doing stuff now, and there's a lot more flexibility. But I still feel like the way the whoever was the costume designer on those, that Burton hired, or I'm kind of sounding like a Burton fanboy right now, but I loved how he did it, and I I just love the execution.
When Michael Keaton rips off his his cowl at the end of Batman Returns, I was like, "Wait a minute, what happened to your costume?" He literally ripped the rubber off of his head.
Yeah,
I don't know if Turtles qualifies as like an 80s thing, but Ninja Turtles, I don't know if that was 80s. I
close
liked
enough,
that one a lot.
and so well done, still holds up. And that's the thing I was telling Wacker before the show. There's a rewatchability I don't feel like with these, and maybe it's not fair, but just for me, a lot of people can watch these Avengers movies 100 fucking times, and I'll see them on TV, and I'm kind of intrigued, but there's something like it's never like the first time. Like a first time, I definitely enjoy it. But revisiting, maybe and it's tied to my childhood too, so maybe it's not fair. Like when I rewatch the Batman movies, the two Burton ones, like they always are just as good. It's like the first time I saw it. So maybe it's tied to my childhood. Maybe that's not fair, but I just don't find I can rewatch these Marvel Universe movies like I can rewatch the stuff of the 80s and 90s. And maybe I'm like a grandpa in a rocking chair for saying that, but there's something about them. I don't enjoy them as much the second time. If anything, I enjoy them less. So they're kind of like almost like a fast food movie for me, like a true popcorn movie. You see it once, I'm done. But I mean, how do you feel about it, Zombie? What do you feel like after you see these movies? It does. How does it go with your anticipation? Does it live up to what you wanted it to be?
I think it's hit and miss with a lot of these movies and characters. Like, building up these origin story films to eventually them all kind of culminating into the first Avengers movie was pure hype. And to this day, after all the MCU movies that have come out, my most favorite iconic moment is in the Avengers movie where they all were there and you had that awesome pan around
I
the
know
team.
exactly. Yes, of course.
And just the score, the Alan Silvestri score, that pan around the heroes, just everything coming together for just those 10 seconds is so adrenaline pumping. Every time I see that, I'm like, fuck yeah! Like, I feel that. The
Yeah.
same energy I felt when I first saw it. It's one of my favorite MCU moments to this day.
Probably my favorite movie. I don't care
Yeah.
if people don't like. I'm not saying it's a great movie, but Avengers #1, it's like all these comic characters are finally like on screen and they're doing it decent. Like I
Mhm.
was I was like, fuck yes. Like I was a child when I saw some of these characters. I'm like, yes.
Yeah. And for me personally, because the Hulk is my favorite Avenger, that part leading up to it, when he delivers that iconic line, that's my secret, Captain. I'm always angry. Hulks out and just like mad bashes that fucking ship,
Kill.
that creature.
It's
It it
amazing.
it gets everything started. Cue the music, and then after all the explosions have cleared and um all the aliens are arriving trying to be threatening, you got the Hulk that leads the whole thing off with his roar, and then just, man, it's such a great feeling to
There's
see
no
that two
way there's
unite.
no way that one of these 80s action stars, I'm not going to say they couldn't have done it. I'm going to say in the 80s, you wouldn't be able to see that kind of movie. The epic scale of that kind of movie couldn't be possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe there is something to that as well. But I think it all just depends on how it all culminates, how it all, kind of comes together. The first Avengers film is my favorite. Um, Doctor Strange is one of my favorite movies in the MCU. And while it doesn't have a a glorified moment like the Avengers Assemble the first time, um, it still has its moments where I look at it and I'm just like, man, that is so badass. That is so cool. No matter how many times I've seen it, I always have that moment. I
It's a
don't
perfect example
I
of
don't
of
ha- I don't have those moments with a lot of the MCU.
yeah. Yeah, and I'm not like, even though I'm going to watch all of them doesn't mean I think they're all great. There's varying levels of okay, or maybe they're good, maybe they're bad.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, that's kind of how I felt though. Like, cause like I said, I felt like they started strong and ended strong. And I did like Winter Soldier. That was right, probably right in the middle. Right? Was Winter Soldier when Spider-Man was first introduced in the Marvel Universe movies? Was that the when he came in?
That was Civil War.
That was
Yeah,
Civil
Civil
War.
War. Mhm.
Okay, so Civil War is the one, and that's kind of right, almost right in the middle, right, of all of them.
Winter Soldier is one that would be closer tied to like an 80s type movie because it
Yeah.
was more of like the spy aspect or something. Or
But
I don't
so
know, maybe
those
not.
are the ones that. So I really did enjoy the start, the middle, and the end because I liked the first Avengers movie. That really did live up to the hype train, and the hype was real for that. Uh, Winter Soldier, and then I liked both Infinity War movies.
Ooh, and
So there was just some in the middle that weren't as impressive to me,
Doctor
or
Strange
maybe
could not have existed in the 80s. That type of Doctor Strange movie could not have existed in the 80s.
right.
That level quality, no, but a Doc Strange movie does exist.
I've heard of that, and I don't think it's very good.
We couldn't
Just
do that in the 80s. You couldn't do quite this level of demolition, scale of buildings, flight. You couldn't do flight as well with the superhero.
mhm.
Just look how cheesy it looked in Superman when he's flying. I mean, it's just it's corny, right? They can fly now, and it's not corny. They can fly through the air through buildings, and it's not corny. And it doesn't look like a set. It looks like it's really happening.
I can argue with that, like Man of Steel, the Zack Snyder stuff with the new Superman stuff. Like a lot of people don't like it. I like the movie, even though it's not. That was one person's version of Superman, and it like I don't think they got the character right, but it looks really good, and you couldn't have done that back then. They couldn't have done that shit.
Mhm. Yeah. I think the magnitude of what these movies have become. Probably couldn't have been done back in the day, but are we getting to is that the turning point for action movies nowadays? Are we being too spoiled by CG and kind of expecting too much out of CG versus practical effects?
I mean, I guess sometimes it does come down to budget, but also like director and writing. Like I'm not gonna say every one of the new ones is good because I don't like all of them. Like sometimes they're weird stories, weird writing, weird directing or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't like every MCU entry, and I'm a big fan of Marvel.
Part of my problem is I'm a lover of a bygone era. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
lover of cell animation that is not done anymore. It's dead. They do not
Old
do
school
cell drawn
animation,
animation anymore.
hand drawn, page to page animation is great, and it's gone because
Yeah,
it's too cheap and easy to do the simple CG type stuff.
yeah. And to me, the genius is in the detail, right? That's what's missing is the detail
Mm-hmm.
from the computer animated stuff. I just we're not getting you're not getting that detail anymore in the cell shading that we would
I
get.
feel like there's less love involved. Like maybe it's a pain in the ass for them to do
Yeah,
it, but it ends up looking amazing. The easier, cheaper stuff, I just feel like I know it's cheaper and easier, and
yeah.
that's what takes me out of it when
It
they.
looks phoned in. There wasn't the time and effort and care. It looks like they had a smaller staff do it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I wish they would do more practical effects. Like they do way too much CG in the newer stuff. I wish they would. They just won't because it's too expensive.
Which
Takes
brings
too much
me
time.
which brings me to what I've just highlighted here from J Chip. My question to you three is: the quality level so high that the writing quality takes a dip? I would absolutely agree, a hundred
Of course it does.
percent,
Yes.
because you could have the shittiest story, the worst actors possible, and as long as it was like, ooh, shiny, doesn't matter. I think the attention span of the movie going audience is too captivated by high price CGI, and that's why they get so offended when it looks terrible.
I was going to bring up Morbius, and I don't mean that to be super disparaging. I don't think it was that great of a movie. It was okay. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen, and the CG was fine to me for the most part. Just the writing and the editing and stuff just seemed weird. Like I felt kind of bored.
Mm-hmm.
They did like the weird smoky effect, like every time they're doing something, and they really overdid that weird smoky effect. But also, like, they're flashing people's throats, but you barely see any blood, and like, how strong are you? You fall through a bunch of buildings, but you're still fine. Like, do we really know what these people can do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And back then, it was just like, oh yeah, you're a super buff dude. Of course, you're gonna live through whatever they do to you.
I don't feel like um let's take a break from like take a step back from the Marvel movies, right? I don't feel like the action stars of today can compare. Okay, The Rock is not Arnold. Vin Diesel is not Bruce Willis. Like I feel like there's a dip in the quality of some of the action stars of today, and people can disagree with that, but there's something missing right now with some of the caliber of action stars. Like it's just not there for me, man. Like
Yeah,
where's the larger than life stars?
I agree with what you're saying, but they become larger than life stars because of these comic movies.
You know a guy who kind of pulls it off though, larger than life. Who's the dude in Guardians the yoked dude. What's his name? Roided up, bald head. He's actually an MMA fighter.
Oh, you mean Dave
Drax
Bautista?
Bautista, yeah.
Yeah, and I think he's actually good in those movies. He's very funny and works. Like,
Yeah.
so he's kind of like a larger than life potential for action star. That guy.
I have a
And
problem with the comedy in those.
true, the
Go ahead,
comedy.
Zombie.
No, you're right. The comedy can be, in my opinion, it's hit or miss depending on who's saying what and how it's executed. But to add to what Ryan was saying about Bautista, um, he not only nailed the look and physique, at least as far as believability goes, with an actual athlete playing the role. He nailed the characterization of Drax so
Yeah.
well that he has actually been public about some of the fan letters that he received for people who suffer from autism. That is a hero they can relate to. And he's sitting there baffled by it because he's just like, I'm just a guy, I'm just an actor. But it means a lot to me to know that that character has so much weight to it. And that's why he enjoys the role so much and wants to play it as much as possible, because now he's a symbol for anybody with autism to look to, because the way that Drax comes across is so, like, it borderlines that so much that people gravitated to that. They were looking at it saying, hey, that's a hero who's just like us. You know, it made a social statement. So, you know, whether an actor can pull off a role is one thing, but when they do and they make an impact like that, I think that says a lot about not only just who played him, but who wrote him, who directed him, so on and so forth.
Didn't
So
hear that. I got two things I could say to that.
go for it.
The Captain Marvel movie, which I don't like very much. It's
I don't
fine.
either.
It's not horrible, but it was like you could feel a little bit of an agenda. Like in the 80s, it didn't feel like they were really pushing an agenda. They're like, "Hey, look, we're big cool dudes beating the bad guys." And now everybody has to have some sort of agenda. And Captain Marvel was very much like feminist agenda kind of stuff. And you could tell in the scene when she starts kicking people's asses where they play "I'm Just a Girl" by Gwen Stefani. I was like, this is too on the nose. You're being too obvious.
Yeah, you're
Mhm.
kind of tacking it on there, you know.
Well,
And
want to be subtle and you want to be subtle and convincing, not over the top. If it seems forced, now we're losing believability. You
I
don't
would
want
say
to feel like we put somebody in this just to be diverse. Well,
well, there's
how about you put somebody in it that's diverse to help expand the story or help,
yes,
you
I
know,
agree. But then I was gonna bring up Black Panther, where like that was it's a good movie. I don't think it's a great movie, but that wasn't just like one specific thing. It was because that makes sense for the character, for the story. All black cast, like that's cool, that's good. But also, you know, it's a middling movie in my opinion. Like, but it's cool and it was subtle. Like it wasn't like, hey, look, like let's put all of all of our ideas into this thing. It was like it's just like, yeah, look, this is the character, this is the society they live in, and yeah, I wasn't hit over the head with a fucking message.
well, it felt forced to me in No Way Home. And I talked to you about this, Whacker, that his friends, and this is okay. Yeah, it is in New York. Okay, New York is very mixed, and that's fine. And it's great to have mixed, diverse characters in a movie. That's absolutely great. But it's like it starts to feel like they're plugging nationalities in to certain characters just to fill a quota. Don't fill a quota. Be diverse to create a world, right? Be
Think that's
diverse.
yeah.
Don't be diverse to create. So when Spider-Man's best friend is like he's got an Asian guy best friend, his girlfriend's African American. It's like it's okay. We're gonna plug in, a Native American guy as his cousin. Are we gonna, it's like it starts to be like that's fine to include these diverse characters, but don't be over the top and looking like you place them like caricatures.
Yeah, that wasn't as forced. And really, I don't hate the Eternals movie. It was fine. It was okay, whatever. But obviously they were going for diversity, and that's fine because of the movie they were doing. They weren't ham-fisting shit.
It's great, but you have to. The execution has to be believable. Okay, like like imagine if it was in a small town somewhere. Are we gonna have like every nationality be somebody's friend, best friend, and like their little group? Not believable. Okay, make the setting fit the diversity.
Peter Parker was another everyman, except that he happened to be a child genius.
And we walk that line too because Hollywood, like I was saying about the James Cameron thing, and True Lies, they tend to stereotype like Muslim people as always being a terrorist. That's not fair to them, to place that stereotype on them, and so certain cultural things lead to that. People being typecast, it's like, so they got to walk that. They got to walk that line. There's a line.
That would have happened more in the '80s action stuff. Like the characters that were diverse would have been more marginalized in those older movies.
Oh yeah, and they were. Yeah.
We got a lot of really good things popping in the chat.
Yeah, it's almost like we're doing extremes on both ends. So in the 80s we were stereotyping so much, but now we're so over the top in trying to be diverse that's comedic now almost.
Mm-hmm.
That they're trying so hard to be diverse, it's almost embarrassing to see it how they're doing it. Their execution is all wrong.
I agree. That's partially why I didn't like the Captain Marvel movie.
Say you're somebody that's Asian. You want to be in a movie, something you're proud of. You don't want to feel like, okay, they just put this role in so there's an Asian guy in this part. Okay? They're not happy with that. They want somebody that is in that movie that's in an awesome role, or they come in a clutch scene and do something impressive, or do something that, they can shine. They don't want to look like, oh yeah, well, I'm so happy that in this Spider-Man movie, they plugged in an Asian guy as his friend. That's great for me. What does that do for them? It's diversity there. That's a fail. To me, that Asian guy's a throwaway character in that movie. He's not that funny. First of all, I just feel like the writing could have been better for that. They're not portraying.
Nobody else caught that Asian friend that he has, Ned, is actually was a character in the comics that became Hobgoblin.
Yep.
That's why there was a little Easter egg in the same movie. And the young girl that had the diamond in the Harley Quinn, the newest Harley Quinn movie, that was Cassandra Cain, who would become Batgirl later, but she's like a ninja, and she's not some chubby little girl. Like I don't understand what that is.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever.
I'm gonna take a moment to answer Donkey's question here. He says, "What do you think of Captain Planet and Power Rangers diversity? I don't need all the characters to look like me to like stuff. It's how the character acts, talks that I connect with or not."
Yeah.
I would agree. I think for teaching diversity, there are other ways you can do it. I just don't feel that the diversity has to make up what the team is, what the characters are. I could be just as impressed with, an all-star cat. Well, The Thing, one of my favorite movies. Not a single woman in that movie. Doesn't bother me, because every character served a purpose. Every character was well written. So even if they gave one of those roles to a woman, as long as she's well written and relatable, that's all I need. I could care less.
I agree.
So I definitely agree with that. I feel that it's more about just how believable they are. And that's why I can't really shun a lot of characters for doing dumb things, but there are some things that are just so obviously dumb that it's amazing that this character is even alive at all. You
Remember how good
know?
the remember how good like the cast of Goonies gelled as like a unit of friends?
Yeah,
That
exactly.
worked. And every character had depth, and every character had a point in the movie where they came through. They helped their friends. They were, it felt more believable. It felt like it wasn't just for diversity's sake in that movie. Like that cast of characters gelled. That's
Hmm.
what you want it to be when you cast movies. You don't
Yeah.
want it to feel like just placement of quotas.
To go back to the Black Panther thing that I was saying, that was hyped as like the first big black superhero movie with all black characters and all black lead and everything. It like yeah, that's cool, but also like it's a good movie. Like they're good actors. It was written well. They just, I mean, to me, it wasn't the greatest movie ever, but it stood for, it helped the community or some shit, like
Hmm.
people enjoyed that they finally had, a whole black cast for a superhero movie. But the movie itself is just sort of okay. Like it's fine.
Dad Level Podcast brings up the point diversity for the sake of diversity is what we are dealing with now. We have
Hmm.
characters that have not gotten screen time that would fit that needed diversity, but they want to change established. I guess he's typing out the rest. I would agree. I think that for the sole purpose of just shoehorning it in there because we have to please everybody because of cancel culture, that they tend to lose something in translation. They tend to not have that same impact.
Sometimes, yeah. What about Shang-Chi? Shang-Chi, like I saw it a couple times. I like the movie a lot, but it doesn't feel like it fits in the MCU because there's something about it that feels outside. It's not because that, the leads are Asian or whatever. It's because the writing is kind of strange and it doesn't feel like it fits with the rest of the movies.
Yeah, I agree. For as much as I like that movie, it feels out of place. And don't even get me started on the Eternals. That movie was such a damn bore that not even three Red
Started
Bulls
on the Eternals. I want to
that
hear everything you have to say.
not even three Red Bulls could keep me awake during that film. And that's how you know, at least in my presentation, that's how you know how much I am bored with a film. I have sat through some stinkers. I have sat through The Room. I have seen The Room
Yeah.
numbers of times. I
Oh
have.
man, sorry to interrupt. Killing it with that's the example I was looking for and I couldn't come up with.
Mm-hmm.
Stranger Things, perfect example of a diverse cast that gelled, the believability that they're all friends. That's all we're asking for. A believability they're friends. I didn't believe those friendships in the new Spider-Man movie, and I just something about it didn't gel for me. It's awkward.
Yeah.
If there's relationships in a movie that are awkward, it's not believable then. There's no awkwardness when I'm watching Stranger Things. I believe they're all friends. They're jiving with each other, they're roasting each other, they're having fun, they're laughing, and it doesn't seem fake. That's all
Mm-hmm.
we're saying here. Make it believable.
J Chip,
Eternal thing also.
you could have hooked that fourth Red Bull into my veins. It wouldn't have kept me awake during the Eternals.
I agree, and Eternal sort of again is one of those that feels like it's outside of everything else. And I don't. It doesn't bother me that there was diversity in it. It bothers me that they weren't written right or
Yeah,
something,
it was
and it seems
boring.
kind of boring.
The characters were not. You couldn't believe that these characters were a group of meta or superhumans that came together and fought for the right reasons. You just looked at them as okay, they're just glorified henchmen, And in many ways they were, because if you know the comics, if you know the Eternals background, they at least kept that part of the mythos there. But the movie is just so bad because the plot is not engaging. The script is boring and horrendous. Nobody, even when you've been on Earth for so many years like they have, you would think that you would assimilate in some way. No, the deliveries are all stone faced and lack emotion. There's just a lot of things that go wrong for that movie.
Yeah, it's got a lot of problems. Like
Mm-hmm.
the enemy that they tried to make out, we find out wasn't really the enemy, and then like they don't really explain it, or like it just sort of goes away. I thought that was the thing you were building towards.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to give spoilers for the Eternal.
Okay. Let me ask you this: do we feel like we're running out of ideas for superhero movies? I mean, so many have been done now. Are we running dry? Are we hitting the wall now?
Not we, it's them. It's the
Yeah.
studios. It's the rich people that are funding this shit. Like, there's a million storylines, and they refuse to specifically do them correctly. X-Men is one of my favorite fucking things of all time, but they just refuse to do the comics. They refuse to do the stories.
Yeah.
It's the way that they are.
Well, they did do the Dark Phoenix saga thing, and that was right out of the comics. But it
They
just,
did it twice, and they did it wrong twice.
yeah, I know.
So maybe 80s movies are better because we have too many options now. Like then we just had one guy that we were gonna root for, and now we've got a million people to root for, and we're not sure if we should root for him.
Well, let me kind of bring this to that same point of this sort of concept of camaraderie. You know, some of which we may see or not see in comic book movies, and I know that we've all been kind of focusing on Marvel for the most part. Um, I think it's safe to say that when it comes to DC movies, they're mostly dumpster fires anyway. They know how to do TV shows well, but
Yeah.
movies they struggle with.
Oh yeah, animated stuff. DC's great at animated stuff.
Yeah.
Well, because it's two leveled. It's critically they're called second rate to the Marvel universe, and viewership wise, just look at the Rotten Tomatoes IMDb scores. They're considered second rates to the Marvel universe. So it's not unjustified to throw shade at the DC ones, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
based on what the reaction is from both ends.
And you were talking about how they built up to the point that they're at. That's what they should have been doing the whole time. Like, I'm speaking to the choir right now. Everybody knows this shit, but like, they had a plan. Marvel had a plan, and they like, I'm gonna do this movie, and then they're all gonna team up. But DC doesn't know what the fuck they're doing. They're just throwing darts at a wall.
I'm gonna take a moment before I jump into the balcony here. I'm gonna highlight Ekun's comment. He says, "Hell, the X-Men series was about acceptance and had many characters with many different ethnicities. Very true. Mutants were also segregated within the mutant community based on their powers. I think Rogue was probably the perfect example of a mutant who was segregated, not intentionally, but felt even more separated from her fellow mutants because of how dangerous her mutant ability was. But there's a subtlety with the comics and the cartoons, and maybe to some extent the early X-Men movies, where the focus wasn't on the diversity. It wasn't about their powers. It was more so about how they fit into this world and how some people viewed them, and how now they're faced with, you know, if they've got a big bad in the corner or something. It was subtle enough that we didn't focus too much on the diversity. We focused more on what it must feel like to go through that separation, what it must feel like to go through that hate, regardless of what your ethnicity was. Movies nowadays, shoehorn in that idea so much that they lose focus over the story that they're supposed to be telling
I agree.
because they want
But
us to focus on those differences.
imagine this though: if every one of these new comic-y action movies were done by those '80s actors, all those '80s action stars, would would we even still feel the same about the movie?
Mm-hmm.
To answer that level, I mean, part of my issue also is just the acting. The Asian guy's acting very amateur feeling. It feels very amateur. I don't think he's funny.
We want a bunch of buff white men, Ryan. They're gonna play every Avengers role,
Yeah. No, that's exactly not what I want though.
and maybe
But
one Jackie Chan.
okay, I just want actors to not suck in role, and like it's like okay, it's like here's what it is, that level. Like I feel like it's like wasting my time when they have scenes almost like, okay, now he's got dialogue again, but he just sucks. And it's taking me out of the scene. And so it's like twofold. It feels forced that it's like the Asian guy friend and the African American girlfriend, but it's like his acting is bad. Okay. The girl is actually decent. Okay. The girl is decent, and in some of the more intimate love scenes in No Way Home, I'm actually fine with it. I don't know if I feel like there's like this love enough between them though.
They're still
And
very young, supposedly, 15, 16, so like maybe
yeah,
that's the thing.
but I've seen great 15, 16-year-old actors and actresses though too. But I'll be critical of who was the girlfriend in the first couple Spider-Mans. I hated that girl. That girl can't act worth a shit either. Kirsten Dunst is garbage too. Okay, and that's a white girl in that role. So I'm saying
Those were cheesy. Those were also very silly,
her
cheesy. They were
acting was so bad.
Sam Raimi, like he's.
I think the
You
new girl is
suck!
better than Kirsten Dunst. I think she's better. But I guess my issue with her still is I don't feel that attraction between them. And I know they're kind of supposed to be both, right? Maybe they're not fully in love. They're kind of there, and at the end, he kind of loses her because the memories are wiped. And I get that. It's like their lover's torn apart. I don't know. Something doesn't gel, man. You know when something doesn't gel between characters in a movie, and you're like, I don't really like this. That's how I feel about the two of them. Could have been better. Could have cast better.
Maybe. Man, they're really leaning heavy into the multiverse shit. Like everything's gonna be multiverse from now on for a while. That's the new thing.
Did you see Spider-Man No Way Home, Zombie?
I sure did.
What do you think of the Asian kid's acting? Didn't he seem like the weakest link? I felt like his acting was just bad.
I can see your point about him being the weakest link, but I think that's intentional. I think that he's supposed to. I think he's supposed to come off as, the nerdy sidekick. And to me, that's believable. However, I would
Right.
argue that maybe he's supposed to come off this way now because of the fact they may be leading towards his hobgoblin origin.
Thinks they're gonna do it.
He has already expressed interest in wanting to do that. He's like, "No, I want to start going into the realm of the hobgoblin story because we've already seen Green Goblin. We've seen that done to
So
death."
that's bad
I
for
mean,
me. So
imagine like
we're
what
gonna get more of him. We're gonna get more of him, is what you're saying. When I already think he stinks.
We may get more of him, but that could also be a good thing because we're just buying into the notion that he's Peter's friend. That's it. That he's like the goofy comic book nerd that's like, "Oh my god, I'm friends with Spider-Man." I'm like, "I'm a dweeb, but now I'm cool now." Comic book characters and shows tend to have that type of character.
Right.
So maybe he's meant to come off as bad or just over the top nerdy that way.
And a nerdy friend is fine in a movie if they can act. I'm taking shots directly at that guy's acting. I think it sucks. Like, and maybe it's that he's young. I just I think when you think about casting a movie, you can cast any. You have the whole world as your option. I just think there's no excuse when you put an actor on the screen, and they just I the guy can't act. That's just my take on him. Maybe I'm
You
being too
suck!
harsh
They
on him.
could do it. I don't think they will do it. And you're right. I don't know if he's a good enough actor to pull that kind of thing off. But also, there's so many different storylines and things that they could do, and they just keep not doing them. So like they're gonna do this is all rich Hollywood studio stuff. Like they'll do what makes them money, and what like maybe they can bring up some weird storylines, but I don't think they're gonna do that one. Like, what's popular? What do people like? Like, they don't know what people like.
That may be true. That may be true. Um, Someone made a point earlier. I believe it was Donkey who was talking about how uh, the studios and the writers, how they, here we go, they're more interested in the international audience and write lame
Yeah,
milquetoast scripts to
I
not
agree.
offend rather than write good stories to please the audience. I agree.
Yep.
I agree with that. So
They gotta
when
put their own spin on it.
right, and so when we look at what modern action writing is of today, which is mostly consumed by comic book movies, it's been a while since we've actually seen, a good standalone action movie. Although that movie Bullet Train with Brad Pitt, I have high hopes for that film. I am really hoping that that is a great movie as the trailer seems to imply because I'm actually interested in seeing that. Um, when we look at the movies of the past and the ones that kind of encompass a lot of what we talked about, believable characters, well written characters, camaraderie, you could see how these characters would work in real life. Um, I've got a perfect example, and it's one of my all time favorite films. I wouldn't even separate it by um, I wouldn't even separate it by decade, piece, genre. It's one of my all around favorite films ever. So let me roll that beautiful footage for as long as I possibly can. And
As
some
far
of
as the
you
three
should know
Spider-Man
this.
girlfriends, I think Emma Stone was the least bad. Kirsten Dunst, no, and the new girl was okay. I thought Emma Stone was pretty good, and I know that not all, there's people that aren't really fans of Emma Stone either. But and you know what? You know why they had chemistry because they actually freaking dated. But I could feel that.
Yeah.
You know,
And
I could feel the chemistry. It was real.
that was another point that was brought up how with certain movies you had the actors getting to know one another, hanging out, interacting prior to filming, and it just added to the believability. The cast of Aliens went through boot camp together, and by the time it came to filming, they were believable as not only soldiers but as that family unit that military members seem to have with one another. You could believe that these guys have served alongside each other for many years through many different missions and just adds to the believability.
I wonder sometimes when those actors start to like date, is it like is that because you know you're gonna get a lot of attention and
Yeah,
it's gonna help out the movie or something?
they
Or
have
do
the
you
wrong
really
intent.
like each other?
They have the wrong intentions. I think it's probably more innocent, like that it's actually maybe they really did hit it off. Only because I think they're in such a closed off world that maybe they don't get out much. so all they meet is who they star with. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, because they're going from project to project in a very closed off world of being an actor or actress. I think maybe sometimes when they do work with somebody, they really do hit it off because they're yearning to find somebody and they can't because maybe they're famous. They can't go out places to meet people. I think it might actually be innocent sometimes when that happens, more
And
than they have an agenda to be famous.
and we know that some Hollywood couples still exist. Some are like Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn. They've been together since they were married.
And
And
For
Overboard,
real?
and on
They're still
Overboard.
together?
yeah,
Damn.
they are still together. No bad blood, no bad press. They keep their personal life separate from their Hollywood careers. They've been an item for decades, you know.
And again, you can't fake that chemistry. They had an Overboard. That movie was hilarious. The
Mm-hmm.
two of them because they had such sparks on screen. You can't fake that. When you don't have sparks on screen, that's something you really got to cast right. When you cast a relationship, if there's not sparks, you got to make people believe it. Even if they're not going to be together in real life, you got to make it people pretend that they are.
Yeah, exactly. And that little brings up this point. Just like Predator, they would work out with Arnold before shooting each day, and that's true. That's true. In fact, that is the movie that I am about to highlight right now. And the numbers, the body bags, they just keep piling up. And part of the story and part of Bill Duke's character arc, Mac, is he starts to lose it because
Hey,
he's
there's
just in
there's a
his
diverse group of badass guys that it enhances it. If it was a bunch of white dudes, that would not have the enhancement of all these characters with their backstories and being friend. And that's an example right there. It worked there. See, when it works, it works.
I agree. Donkey just said jungle sword.
the Django Schwartz merchandising.
You gotta have me back on when you do some sci-fi with the fucking some fucking Star Wars baseballs.
No, the Schwartz. Okay, here's another iconic scene from an already discussed film, but it again highlights the points that we're trying to make. And again, this is another favorite entry of mine. So here we have aliens. The Colonial Marines have just entered the hive on LV 426. Got the awesome Michael Bean there, Corporal Hicks, Bill Paxton.
Zombie, can I recommend later on we do the Winter Soldier scene, the introduction of Spider-Man? That scene
Sure.
is really good.
Still the wrong movie, dude.
It's not what I thought you said. It's Winter Soldier.
Civil War.
You said that twice. It's Civil War.
All right, I'm an idiot.
Okay.
Civil War.
So here we go.
I confused those two. Damn, I confused those two.
We've got all the soldiers being ambushed by all the stunt performers. Usually it's Tom Woodruff Jr. and Alec Guinness, I believe, or Alec Gillis. I forget which one it is. They usually are the guys that are in the xenomorph suits. So they've awoken the hive. They're starting to die one by one. They're getting picked off. They can't even see the enemy yet again. And you have this camaraderie of the soldiers fighting to stay alive, but they're dying quicker than they can escape. And we don't really know much about these characters early on because a lot of these guys, despite having names, are still redcoats. Are still
The only thing that could have
red
made this
shirts.
scene better is if we had the Asian guy from No Way Home, the kid in this.
Damn it, Ryan. I don't like how close that microphone is up to his nose.
So there we go. We lose a pawn there. And this is also another example where we had a believable female lead who proved she could be just as badass as the dudes.
Nurse capable.
You know, Alien made her a strong female character. Aliens made Ripley a strong female warrior. Yes, exactly, J-Chip. They feel like a ragtag team and they can get shit done with teamwork. Unfortunately, this proved they can all die as a team because they were way over their heads when it came to the xenomorphs. They were not prepared to handle this species.
This is also a great version of practical effects and maybe a little bit of special effects, but like this is a really good version of practical effects fucking win, and the writing and the directing and the acting, all very good.
I gotta play this score real quick.
Oh man, they cut the freaking.
Did they?
We played, yeah. I think we could only do like a minute of each scene. It'll come back.
Ah, son of a bitch.
Let's tell people in chat it'll be back.
I guess now is the perfect time to also play this again.
Fuck you, Mike.
And again, I just don't understand YouTube, because why is it okay for other channels to upload full movie scenes and we can't even like play out like a minute?
Right.
No, but you pissed off the YouTube gods.
Oh, what else is new? I seem to.
Susan Wojcicki doesn't like you anymore.
I seem to have that appeal. I seem to be the one that, you know, I guess says the things or does the things most people don't want to have done or heard.
Oh no.
Listen here, YouTube. I got something to say to you.
A whole basement full of YouTube comments.
Are you starting to piss me off, you little pigly son of a bitch, YouTube? Call me.
I'm having fun.
What we'll do is we'll just play still photos, and we'll act out the parts. You do the chopper, do you try it? We'll pull a script up online, and we'll act out all three parts.
Zombie, I have so many notes written down that we're never gonna get to.
Yeah. Because we only got another 10 minutes before we get a wrap.
Really?
We started at 12:20.
Damn, time
It's like
flies.
2:05, yeah.
I knew I'd have fun talking to you guys.
Yeah, okay, we're coming back. We're coming back. Well, ain't that a little bitch? Well, as you can see, my damn good looking hair has pissed off YouTube yet again.
Your hair is somehow controversial.
Apparently my hair is a breaking point for YouTube.
Beautiful hair, by the way.
Well, thank you. I do try. It's not spiky and black and all over the place like I want it to be, but who knows? Maybe it'll go gold someday.
Maybe you'll be an '80s action hero.
Ah, time to be alive. Now, let me see if I can find that scene in particular. I'm curious if even just having footage up will block me, or is it just because I happen to play the sound?
As soon as you did the sound, that's when it fucked up.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's try this again. And
If you type like Civil War Spider-Man scene,
yeah, I got it.
Spider-Man,
Okay, here we go. God, he's such a little baby here.
Yeah, Tom Holland is like 32 right now.
In dog years?
Spider
So-
years.
So what scene am I thinking of, Whacker? They're like in like a mall or something, in like a
No,
building.
they're in the parking lot of like a like Beijing or
Yeah.
Germany or some shit, like a like a
What if you
plane.
looked up zombie? What if you looked up Civil War Spider-Man fight scene? Because this is just him and Iron Man talking here.
Okay.
Well, technically, this is when he first shows up. You dick.
No, but you know what I meant. I meant when he
Under it.
the action scene.
Ryan, I have watched these movies many times.
This is one that stands out to me from all these movies. That this was like, oh my god, they did it again. Dude, we can't show anything, man.
Oh, son of a bitch.
We better not have lost the whole stream now.
Son of a bitch. Yeah, I believe in Zombie. I stand with you, Zombie.
Yeah, dude, I guess we can't show anything, man. What a bunch of bullshit.
Maybe we should talk to the YouTube execs.
I don't think we're gonna lose the whole podcast. I think we're just it's gonna like pause and then pick up when they finally let us go.
Yeah, we can't risk another clip
No, we
because
can't.
the whole. We could show some still photos of it, but then it's like fail. Who cares? You know. Man, we should. That was like 10 seconds of that, and we got cut again.
That's weird.
You could. This is exactly why I never stream Star Wars games. And Chum is saying, "Can you three just act out the scenes?"
I mean, I'm down.
That's what I was saying. Oh, okay, here we are. Yeah, guys, we can't play any more clips. We don't want to lose the whole podcast. So what happens is like there's like the Avengers, man, and there's like Spider-Man, and they're like kicking and punching and like flying and stuff, and it's like picture it in your mind. It's really good. That's like the scene.
Well, yeah, you don't have to picture it. They do that pretty good.
Is that like as good as the clip, guys? Like what I just portrayed in your mind, man?
the Civil War story was way more complicated, and it would have involved way more heroes. But at least they tried their own
What
version.
happened was he came in, he's like, I'm Spider-Man. And then Captain America came in, he's like, I'm Captain America.
That's not what they did or said.
And then he said, Avengers Assemble.
Yeah.
They didn't do that in that movie either.
And then they said, YouTube, kiss my ass, bitch.
I remember them saying that in that movie, actually.
Yeah. They definitely said that.
Remember when Ant-Man was talking to Tom Holland, and they were like, "Hey, YouTube sucks."
YouTube sucks.
That was a good part of the movie.
Remember in the Avengers movie when they said YouTube has suspended this movie for stream violations? That was my favorite part.
Remember when they said Sylvester Stallone and Jackie Chan should never be in a movie together? I don't remember that either.
Okay, so let me see if I've. Okay, so. Try to. Okay, I'm gonna try to spell it out here.
Remember when Zombie was spelling things out? Pepperidge Farm remembers.
Pepperidge Farm remembers. Do you remember when three losers came together to do a podcast and nobody was watching and YouTube blocked them? Pepperidge Farm remembers.
God damn it! Pepperidge Farm, what the fuck?
I also managed to score myself some, what are those fancy cookies called that everybody loves that they make?
It's the Milano cookies.
Yeah, there you go.
I only know of Pepperidge Farm because of Family Guy.
And I remember the Milano cookies I purchased. Pepperidge Farm
I remember
remembers
what you did.
because they kept your money. Okay, so let's see if we can do this. Okay, so Ryan is describing the Civil War scene with the fight and everything. Okay, so all right, we got this big plane here. Okay.
Fuck you. Remember when Wackeroni said fuck you to Chum Nasty? Yeah, that's right now.
Okay, we have one Avenger here. Here comes.
Wait a minute, Zombie. We're playing too much of the movie here. This is better than the movie.
Okay,
We're gonna get.
comes Vision with his magnificent flowing cape.
Okay, so that's Vision.
And so he's coming down. There's his little flying lines. Pew. Coming down there. Okay. And we got.
This is what it's come with. This is what it's come to, Geeks with Cash. YouTube's forcing us to draw it out hand by hand.
Okay.
Good, it works. Totally works.
Here's Iron Man looking like a giant douche, literally.
Wait a minute.
His little square
Iron
body.
Man's like,
Even
look at
though-
my well-sculpted goatee.
And not being
Pepper.
mistaken for a Ninja Turtle.
Pepper, Gwyneth, come blow me.
So there's Iron Man there.
Wait, that's Iron Man? God damn it. Vision just farted. Smelly.
Okay, the imaginary line has been drawn. So we've got Captain America. He's at the front. He's represented by this wee little shield. And then Who else did we have over here? We had Hawkeye, right? Okay.
Ah! Moses just said Ryan acts like his facial hair isn't on fleek. Ah!
So we've
Whoa, whoa,
got
Iron Man is my inspiration, Moses.
so there's Hawkeye with
Yep.
his bow and arrow. Okay.
You sure that's not Kite Man?
Okay, no, because Ant-Man is over here.
Jesus.
And see, he's got his little feelers,
Happy Easter, everyone.
his feet. Okay.
Jesus has risen in the form of bad drawings from Zombie.
So there's Ant-Man there. Bear in mind, this is being done with a touchpad. It probably could have been better with a mouse.
Pretty sure
What are you talking about?
that looks
What
like
you
you
talking
wrote.
about? Right, what are you talking about? Bad drawings. This is already better than the Marvel universe.
Okay,
Scor-
so
Scorsese himself just changed his mind about all the Marvel. He's like, I have seen the true Marvel movie, and it's zombies drawing.
okay, I believe Spider-Man was like on the plane. So I'm just gonna yo-yo him off the wing there. There you go.
Where is Spider-Man's friend?
Fuck!
For Ryan's director's cut, we're gonna draw Ned on the
I
plane
need the Asian
here.
guy with the butt cut,
We've got Ned on the wing of the
with
plane.
the bull hair,
There's his bull hair,
the
We
bull
don't-
haircut.
and
Don't need that.
Yes, gotta get the bull haircut.
and he's strapped to the plane because if this was an 80s film, of course he'd be strapped to the plane. And let's see, let's add some 80s TNT. Okay, so we got it's usually 3 sticks of dynamite if I remember.
Omega Ace, they kept threatening to suspend the stream, so we're gonna just draw out the movie scenes now.
Okay, so here's the stick of dynamite, or the sticks of dynamite, ready to explode the plane with Ned on top. Okay. And then Hawkeye is just like, say the word, Cap. I've got a clear shot.
On the other side, you got Russian writing and a pentagram and Kite Man. Are we on board with that?
Let's see. Isn't War Machine over here also? Isn't War Machine in this scene?
Now, Vision ends up fighting War Machine or whatever, so yeah, War Machine's on the other side.
Okay, so let me just do this.
And then Sam Jackson's in there saying, "I've had it with these motherfucking snakes on this motherfucking plane."
Ryan, that's a lie. You're lying to people.
Let's see. I'm gonna try to see if I can.
And then Sam Jackson's like, "I will strike down upon thee with furious vengeance."
Nope, he never says that in the
Let's
the
see.
damn CO.
Okay, so
Furious anger.
since War Machine's over here and he's a carbon copy of Iron Man, we're just gonna do this. And let's see. Okay, who else are we missing?
Black Widow and
Oh, yes.
Hawkeye and
Black Widow. Okay, we'll put
Black Panther and Ant-Man.
Spiders are cannibals, but they all flock together in some way. So here's Black Widow.
Holy shit.
And she's kind of coming down from.
Yeah. That works, you weirdo.
She's got her little hiya pose and her extra feet there.
Yeah, and then Shrek. You can mention like Shrek's in there somewhere.
Oh yeah, Shrek's over here looking for donkey.
And then Thanos snaps his finger.
Okay, so there's
and
Shrek.
is over.
Okay. Meanwhile, over here in the miasmos of space, we have
This would have been the 80s version of this movie.
we have
Where
we have the power glove. Thanos is kind of like, "Hey y'all, how's it going?" There we go. And while this is taking place and out in the cosmos, and we got a little swirly here to kind of add to it, a little black hole. You know, this is space. Oh, we gotta have Saturn. I don't know why, but we can't have a galaxy without Saturn. So we're just gonna do a little Saturn here. Although that kind of looks
Now,
like
how
a
much green screen is being used here, Zombie? How much green screen?
how much green screen? Let's see.
At least three. At least three green screen. Oh no, it's actual green screen.
this,
Now it looks like everybody's dead.
this is all green screen.
Now they all look like they're flat and dead.
It's like I'm there. Is this virtual reality? It's like I'm there in the movie set.
Oh wait, we've got some suggestions from the audience here. Let's see. Okay, dad level, I can honor that. So let's put Optimus Prime in the back here. Actually, it's not Optimus Prime.
Are we gonna talk about the Transformers movies? They might have been comics.
Let's see. Let's kind of cheat this a little bit. I think we can. No, I don't. Well, yeah, we could actually. Okay, so I'm gonna do this.
Wait, is this the standard or 3D version?
This is the 4K.
Okay.
This is a 4K.
Ryan, this is the first Avengers movie. You wouldn't get it.
Okay, so
You gotta put on glasses, guys. Put on the 3D glasses.
okay, so there we go. And put some smokestacks. Okay. Do.
Spider-Man shows up on one of the sides. It's on the Iron Man side. Oh wait, you already got
Gotta get the
Spider.
little wheels. We don't.
But Scarlet Witch is in there somewhere.
Oh yeah, isn't she in this somewhere? Okay. So we've got. Okay, so there's the other set of wheels. Don't ask me how it runs, even though the tires look like this. It's movie magic. Again, I can CG this all I want. And let's put.
Are they all played by 80s action actors?
I mean, we are putting the Pork Chop Express in here. So all we've got to really do is put Kurt Russell in the front and just have him say, Jack Burton. So we'll just do this. There we go.
Kurt Russell could have played like, fucking, what's his name?
All right, so there we go.
That's exactly what Civil War looks like.
That's the full Infinity War right there.
Okay, so let me take this back a bit. Let me see if I can decrease or yeah, see, this is what happens when you buy full screen, people. You don't get the whole picture. That's what we're lacking here. So let me see what we can do about this.
Fury is on one side or another, or doesn't care. I don't remember.
Have George Lucas touch this up though before we're done.
Well, I mean, that's where all the green screen would come in. So let's widescreen this. Let's get this
Have
blown
George
up.
Lucas have him step over Jabba the Hutt to make this scene as good as it can be.
Let's do step by step what would happen. D&D style. All right, we got those people on the other side of the line.
Okay, let's see if I can enlarge this. Okay, there we go. See, there's the Pork Chop Express, kind of tucked away. Yeah. And see, this is the scene. This is what happened in the scene that we didn't get to see. Jack Burton drove his semi truck through, and started telling his story. When the lightning's crashing and the The sky is thundering and the Avengers are at war with each other.
That's when he crashes his fucking car through shit. The fuck are you talking about?
Then we could have the little.
I think you're missing a couple characters.
Am I? Am I missing?
I'm pretty sure there was like Black Panther and Scarlet Witch and some other
Oh.
shit.
Oh, okay, okay. Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah. So Scarlet Witch, she was. Where was she? Was she next to Vision? I don't remember.
She was on the Iron Man team
Okay.
until later.
Okay, so we'll put her next to her bow. Okay, there's her little witch's hat.
I think I know Zombie which team you're on. You remember more of those characters.
And then where was Black Panther? On this side or this side? I don't remember.
Whichever Winter Soldier was on, he was on the opposite side.
Oh yes, Winter Soldier was over here, so let me draw Winter Soldier. And Sam can be represented by this misshapen snowman.
I prefer the Summer Soldier though.
So
It's a Winter Soldier, not a Snowman Soldier.
I mean, I can't think of any other way to illustrate a Winter Soldier than to give a snowman
Can we get a Spring Soldier?
a chain gun.
Yeah.
So there we go. We got to have the bullet belt feeding through.
Autumn Soldier.
See? And then we got the little coal eyes. And he's just like... Bah, 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 bah.
It looks like a tank. This looks like the No Limit Soldier's tank.
There we go.
Fuck are you doing?
Make
Okay.
him say,
Yeah, let me give him the robot arm. Was it his left or his right?
None of your business. I
Okay.
refuse to tell you.
Did John Favreau direct this scene?
Okay, so look at that. He's ready. He's got bullets spraying everywhere in a very irregular pattern. Alright, so we got the Winter Soldier. Okay. Ryan wanted the deleted character, the Spring Soldier. So we're gonna do this. Codename Daffodil. Okay, yep. Trying to get that. I guess that pedal kind of wilted.
That's Ryan's his password for most of the things.
Okay,
Retro
so
Daffodil.
there's the Spring Soldier. Okay. So we've got the Winter Soldier getting his chain gun going, and then we've got the Spring Soldier. I don't know what's going on here, but let's add some bubbles. It looks like she's blowing bubbles. There you go. I don't know how you end up with a square bubble, but that's pretty cool.
The trees.
See, she's got like her mouth next to the little wand, and she's like, pew.
Is this where you find the treasure? Like when you're done with this, can we find the treasure?
That's actually a good question. I don't know if anybody has found the map.
All right, Waldo.
Waldo?
Zombie
Nobody
treasure.
can find Waldo. Even I, the guy who's drawing him, don't know where he's at.
There's somewhere.
Okay. And then we've got Black Panther was on this side, right? Or was he on this side?
On the side of Ant-Man and Hawkeye and
So
whoever.
Let's draw.
Think.
Okay. Let's give
Maybe I'm
him
wrong.
a little kitty cat.
Ah, what an adorable kitty cat.
Kind of looks like Mimikyu, but you know he's just a little kitty cat. And got whiskers here. That's what I'm gonna name this cat. I'm gonna give Black Panther his original name, Whiskers.
I don't think that was his original name.
I would have called him Joe Exotic.
Oh, you're right, Chum. They did cut that out. So let me add that to the chaos going on here. So we've got, let's see. Actually, I'm gonna cheat this a little. And we're gonna go with this shape, I think. Yeah, I think this kind of sums it up. Okay, so while the Avengers are fighting, we've got the bus from Speed, and
Oh man,
so this is a deleted scene. So let's
I think this has to be the finale because we're hitting that 2 hour mark for the speed bus here.
Oh no, we're not gonna stop. We're just gonna keep going.
yeah. Okay, so we've got, let's see, we got the windows on the bus.
Go round and
Yep.
round.
Do the windows go round and round?
We got the little
I don't think
door.
windows do that.
And then, it's got like that little wave cut in the walls for some reason. Oh, and here's, here's Keanu and here's Sandra Bullock. They're embracing, like, keep the bus going over 50.
Wait, that's a different part of what you're drawing?
Okay, so there we go.
What about the cans? There's cans. There was just cans.
That would probably be back over here more when she hit the the carriage that had the cans in it.
What if Scarlett Johansson was worried about cans?
And well, she's too busy over here doing spidery things.
Hey,
So,
the people at the bottom right aren't they're not busy doing
of course, we
anything.
gotta have the dash lines so everybody knows this bus is zooming. There we go. So we got another plane that's probably over here that they run into just before our heroes slide out the bottom. See, they're getting ready. They're getting ready to make their little scene here.
I don't think 80s people would approve of what you're doing.
We got the little scooter thing that they're on.
Wait, what kind of scooter?
You remember that little cart that he slid under the bus?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's this little thing here. And
Damn it.
We've got the two bodies. Kind of look like a mummy. There you go. in their warm embrace. There you go. Yep, see?
Beautiful.
They're holding on to each other for dear life, and they're witnessing this comic book battle come to life. Meanwhile, Thanos is over here raising his glove.
Thanos wasn't there in Civil War. What are you talking about?
Oh, that's right. He's not. Actually, he's on the other part of the galaxy having a latte.
Yeah, having a what?
There we go.
What?
He's having his little galactic coffee.
Yeah.
There. Okay, I think we have nailed what the true direction of this fight scene was supposed to encompass. I think from the inclusion of Shrek, the Spring Soldier, we had the bus from Speed going through the same airport.
Rude.
Meanwhile, Ned is strapped to a plane that's about to be exploded with an arrow from Hawkeye. And everybody is just going to town with each other, except for Ant-Man, who's just, kind of chilling right here.
Wait, where's Ant-Man chilling?
Ant-Man is right here. Yep. That's our Paul Rudd right there.
Are you sure? That looks like Russian.
Well, I mean, he is on his back, so you kind of have to envision it that way. And speaking of vision, there he is again, next to Scarlet Bewitched. Actually, I'll draw little fly lines to indicate, here I come.
I think it was an interesting choice for them to have like Vision try to. Vision end up fucking up War Machine, whatever. Like, and they said it's because he was distracted, and like maybe because he's in love with Scarlet Witch or whatever the fuck.
Right. And then of course we had the Pork Chop Express. Jack Burton driving through on his way to Little China again. So yeah, I think we I think we managed to pull off what the director really wanted in this scene.
Yeah,
I think we
you
nailed it,
nailed it.
gentlemen.
Yeah, you did. No,
So,
you did. You did a great job, Zombie.
well, I had your direction, Wacker.
Also, you're wrong about everything you've done.
Am I? I feel this is 100% accurate to the mythos. This is exactly how it played out in the comics.
Remember when Shrek showed up and he was like, "Get out of my swamp," or not like get out of my airport. I remember when Shrek said that.
Yep, exactly. So you
He
see,
was like,
this is the scene, gentlemen. This is what they should have gone for to fully encompass the power of the Civil War arc.
"That's the best." Yes, I agree. That's the best you could like. I know exactly what's happening in this scene.
Right? I think the visual cues are strong and everyone is fairly represented.
Pretty sure there was a spider.
Yeah, a giant spider. Look at that. You see? Spider-Man here and Black Widow are both ready to attack the injured Ant-Man. And I mean, if we want him to go Goliath, we could. That would involve a green screen.
No, we can't do that. Not visually with the drawing. How dare you?
I mean, maybe we could. Just saying.
We're talking flat Captain America shield. Now he looks like he's for Hydra or like the devil.
Oh, you know what? That brings up a good point. So, let's see. Maybe we can do. Oh yeah. Well, since he'd be in hell, we'd have to have him come up from here where the Pork Chop Express is. So why don't we put
Ghost Rider.
okay, it's a little misshapen, but you get the idea. Let me see if I can actually try that again. No, that one's kind of close. That's kind of close to it. Okay, so here we have Captain Antichrist, and he's coming up from the fires of hell.
But Doctor Strange has to be able to help him with that.
I guess this is what happened to Mordu or whatever his name was.
Yeah, do more, dude.
Yeah, so here's Captain Antichrist coming out from hell. And then let's see, for the sake of argument, you know, we're trying to encompass every hero at this point. Okay, so Ikun is or Esquire is saying T800s are missing. Okay, so why don't we put, okay, this is just a suggestion. Maybe that's what Jack Burton had in his truck. So maybe what we've got are a bunch of T800s. And they got their big ass guns. Their huge rifles or whatever they use.
Be Easter weirdos.
Okay. So we've got the T800s there. Now, because this is Skynet, and through the magic of CG, we're going to use computers.
Nah, use the 80s actors. Use the 80s action stars.
Okay. Oh, nope. Can't have that, because then that Terminator robot would be with Thanos. So, okay, let's green screen a bunch of T-800s. They're all being brought to this war by Jack Burton. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Okay, so there we go. We've got a semi-army of T-800s ready to be delivered to the Civil War fight in Avengers, and they're being driven in by Jack Burton. Meanwhile, the bus from Speed is speeding through the other end of the airport as Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock make their heroic escape underneath the bus.
And
Shrek happened to come upon the airplane because he's looking for Donkey. Speaking of the airplane, we've got Ned tied to the plane, getting ready to be exploded by some 80s TNT. And we've got just about every Avenger here ready to duke it out.
I feel like we're missing one. We might have gotten them all, but I feel like we might be missing somebody.
Okay, who are we missing possibly? Thor was
don't
not
know.
present for this.
Yeah, not Thor, not Hulk, not Iron Man, War Machine, Ant-Man, Black Panther, Black Widow, Hawkeye, Ant-Man. What are we missing? Winter Soldier, Falcon. Wait, was Falcon there?
Yes, Falcon was there. You're right. Okay, well, this is why we green screen, folks. Let's put Falcon, over here. Let's do this. And he's flying. And oh, look at that. He's actually a bird. There you go. And then of course we got to give him whoosh lines. So whoosh. And whoosh.
Don't give him whoosh lines, you whoosher.
Whoosh. There you go. Oh, you know what? Maybe the reason why he's actually late to this whole thing is maybe because he's a Silverhawk.
Yep. I don't know what that means, but I'm just gonna say how dare you, because I'm
wings of silver, nerves of steel, Silverhawks, partly metal, partly real. There we go.
See, but if I was able to remember that one, there's probably other ones.
So there we go. We've got Falcon, and he's now a Silverhawk. He's been brandished the logo there, his little metallic butt, and then for good measure we could go, Tallyhawk. There you go.
A very confusing drawing. If you just showed me this randomly, I'd be like, what the fuck?
All right, so now I think we wait. Who mentioned? I think I missed something. Okay, this is what happens when you have multiple writers and one cinematographer. Okay, somebody mentioned there needed to be a fight with a giant scorpion, I think. Okay, so meanwhile over here in the corner, and then we got the little giant pincher.
The Rock was the scorpion.
No, the Rock was the Scorpion King, and he sucked at it, so. Okay, so meanwhile, over here, we've got a giant scorpion, and we've got Perseus. He's got his little gold shield there.
Eventually, you're just gonna scribble all different characters, and we won't be able to know what the fuck it is.
So we've got Perseus fighting the giant scorpion. and he's like launching acid or whatever from his tail.
Probably nobody watched that movie except for you and me.
Okay. So, and then up from the depths, we've got a skeleton soldier. And he's like, hey. And he's got his giant sword here. And he's coming out of the dirt. So we gotta put like the little dirt mound. I'm gonna make it look like a mound. So he's coming out of the dirt. There you go.
This into a video game.
So we've got Perseus fighting the giant scorpions and the skeleton warrior. I'm sure that Jason from the Argonauts will help. Oh, that's actually a good idea. Let's see here.
Drawing a transformer takes a lot of work. You got to do a lot of boxes.
Okay, so we've got the Cobra Jet in here, getting ready to fly away. We got the whoosh lines, even though it looks like the plane is farting. And then we've got
#fireplane.
Let's see. Now he doesn't want to collide with the airplane here, so we'll put the Sky Striker right there.
Vision and Scarlet Witch could just change everything if they wanted to.
Oh, sure they could. They sure could. Okay, so here's the Sky Striker. You've got the little missiles down there on the wings. And then,
Is this what we really want?
let's see. Let's put a word bubble. I think we need a word bubble in there. So, let's put okay, so we're going to do this. Now, this is not the plane yelling at folks. This is the pilot. So, okay, there we go. So, we've got the pilot yelling, "Yo, Joe." Okay, so the Sky Striker is after the Cobra Jet. Okay. Where's the Autobots and Decepticons? Okay.
They're on the other side of the line.
A last minute
Civil War.
a last minute addition, but I can do this. Okay. So we're gonna add. Now this is, you gotta use your imagination here, folks. Gotta use your imagination. You know, not everything we do is green screen nowadays. So this is Megatron's Luger form, which he normally needs Starscream to fire, but he decided to become fully sentient and fire himself off. I know how that sounds. And then we've got like, okay, here's the explosion lines. You know, you gotta, I can't do the 80s laser sound, but you get the idea. And up here, he's firing at Bumblebee in car form. Okay, so there you go.
Zombie, you're on your own fucking plane of existence at the moment.
So Megatron in gun form is shooting Bumblebee. Okay.
If you say so.
And
That's a pew pew if I've ever seen one. That's a
Yeah.
big old pew pew.
That's a pew pew. You know what? We need, now that I think about it, we need the text box again. We need the big onomatopoeia in there. So there we go. And again, you could only see this in widescreen. You couldn't see this in full screen. This is widescreen perspective.
I think they're good.
And then for, let's see, what are we doing here?
This, are you sure this is Civil War, or is this something else?
I think this fully encompasses Civil War. I really do. I think with every suggestion we this project is coming to fruition. We are nailing it right on the head there. So,
What side? What side, zombie? What side do you think Optimus would take?
well, if we're following the plot line, Optimus would be dead at this point. As a matter of fact, let's go back to the drawing board. No pun intended. And we actually should be making. Where are my tools? Um, we should be making Megatron Galvatron at that point. But this is the MCU. They're not one for continuity, so we'll keep that where it's at. I think.
That's a pretty good drawing, by the way.
I think this fully encompasses what the Civil War battle should have looked like.
It really doesn't at all. But it's great that you did it.
Okay, I'm trying
There's
to.
no way. There's no way that I'd be able to decipher this. This is a puzzle.
Is it though? Is
It's
it?
a puzzle.
I don't know. I feel like anybody looking at this could decipher it, but
Leave.
that is just my opinion. And
Yeah. Let zombie know in the comments, and is if you knew nothing about this movie, would that picture, would you be able to figure out which movie?
I think our audience could figure it out by looking at it and saying this is the real Civil War battle.
You're giving your audience you're giving your audience too much. Never mind.
I think in the end, uh, I think in the end we have successfully told the story that needed to be told, and in conjunction to our podcast tonight, folks, I think we've explored what made action movies of the 80s stand out. I think we've explored why they continue to stand out, why they continue to live in our hearts and minds. And while we may enjoy modern action movies of today, whether they be Marvel, DC, or any other action movie, um, in the end, honestly, there's just no replacing practical with CG. I think the point that was made earlier about the more we invest in CG, the more we lose in character development and story writing, and I would agree. No matter how green screen or how flashy a certain scene looks, nothing beats big, oily men firing rifles. And interpret that however way you want.
That is not what I took from this. That is absolutely not what I took from this.
um, both are great. Both have their ups and downs, but in the end, I will always go back to the awesome movies of the 80s. Whacker, you mentioned you had a lot of points to kind of tackle.
Yeah, let's go over everyone in detail. I have one question, Zombie. What drugs did you do tonight, and where can I get some?
It's not drugs, Ryan. It's just my love and passion for films. That's what got me here. Maybe it's
Right.
this expired Whataburger I ate. I don't know.
Zombie, you make way more sense than Ryan does when he talks about this stuff. Like, I, I feel like we got different perceptions of
Wackeroni,
certain
I'd love to
things.
go in your apartment and urinate on your Dragon Ball statues.
Yeah, that's because you're rude. You're rude.
I mean, what are your closing thoughts, honestly?
Go ahead, Ryan.
Uh, to be serious, I mean, I think a good blend of practical effects and CGI is the answer here. I think when you go full green screen, it's there's you lose something. But we can't go back budget wise and to the elaborate uh practical effects and building massive sets because it just wouldn't the studios aren't going to justify that because of digital. I
Mm-hmm.
think if you do a blend of both is the answer.
I agree with you. A nice blend of both is a good answer.
In a perfect world and a perfect cinematic universe.
But also, the new stuff, we can do more things now that they couldn't do when they were doing that. If you think they wouldn't do that if they could, of course they would. They'd make like an animated movie, they'd make series, they'd make all kinds of shit. Like it is, we're able to do so much more these days. And yeah, it's not all great. And sometimes you see a lot of flaws in like the new stuff, and maybe it looks like a green screen all the time. But they're able to do more than they were able to do back then.
Mm-hmm. And Dead Level brings us to a good point. It says, sadly, it's like those jobs don't exist anymore for films. And that may be true. That may be true, but I can still see how some practical effects are still being utilized by directors. We may not see a lot of work or a lot of the works of some well known special effects guys, but I still continue to see a kind of resurgence of the practical versus CG, and I hope that kind of continues.
I
I
hope so too. I love practical effects, but they don't do it because it's just cheaper and easier.
And while that is another topic for another podcast, um, it is something that is important to the success of a lot of these films. You know, we didn't really use a lot of CGI back then because it was a brand new technology. We relied on good actors, or even if they're not good actors, we relied on well written one liners, big explosions, just awesome storytelling overall. And I think we kind of need to go back to that, especially with these comic book films where they take just a little bit too much liberty with it. Give the audience the real deal. You know, these
Yeah.
action movies may not be great story wise, but they were the real deal. They were real enough that you were entertained the entire time.
They were the original superheroes. I agree.
Yes, the original. These are our. This was the MCU before the MCU existed, and we owe a lot to these films. You know, I have my favorites Marvel wise. I have my minimal favorites DC's, mostly Batman. Um, but I have my love for the '80s action movies too. So if we can find a way to kind of either resurgence the '80s action films, or maybe just apply some of that pizzazz to modern action movies, and not focus too much on shoehorning I can't even say it, shoehorning in all these different elements for the sake of and not having to worry so damn much about offending people, maybe we can kind of get back to that good feel action movie type. I don't know.
Possible.
So that's all I've got. I feel the more we go into this subject, the more we're gonna start going into the whole practical effects versus CGI discussion,
I
which is
thought me
still.
and Ryan were gonna fight way more than we did.
um, yes,
That's. I'll see you outside, Wacker.
Let's do that outside.
exactly, J Chip. First Blood is definitely one of my favorite action movies because of how human John is, and his characterization was done perfectly. And it's also a tribute to the novel that First Blood is based off of. So, if they can do a book justice, why can't they really do a comic book? Is all I'm asking. But we can argue that for another time. I feel like I've pretty much said all I needed to on the subject. Do you guys have any closing arguments? Any closing statements?
That's a wrap.
I think it's easier to enjoy new stuff than it is to enjoy the old stuff. Like, I love the old stuff, but it's easier to digest the new stuff.
Mm-hmm. And to J Chip's point earlier, maybe it's just because that is what you grow up with. Maybe that's just what you were exposed to, and you kind of accept it as the norm, you know.
Maybe. Yeah.
But I encourage anybody to look at some of these films if you've never seen them, and let us know what you think. Let us know what would have worked for you had you seen these maybe at the time of release or maybe shortly after. Um, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section or even in Discord as we wrap up the show tonight. We're going to be.
Can we get a
opening that up
mod? Drop Wackeroni's link for everybody. Check out his superhero movie reviews. Very well done.
Well, I have to
He
do
makes his own. He makes his own costumes.
Yes.
Thank you.
That takes work, making your own costumes. Come on, give him credit.
It's DIY shit, but also like I'm just doing them for fun. I don't really know what I'm talking about. I'm not a professional critic. I'm just talking about movies that I like and whatever, or maybe don't like.
Well, who even is a professional fucking critic? Like fucking Leonard Maltin. You know what I'm saying? Like what even is that? Like
There's people that
I'm a
get paid for it. Like,
professional. I went to the DeVry Institute for Film Studies, and I can critique and review a movie better than you. What the hell is that? And anybody can be a movie buff.
thank you, Ryan. I just do it because it's fun for me, and I happen to be doing the Marvel movies because that's fun for me.
Right. All right then. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up the show tonight. As always, we want to thank you all for being here, supplying us with your insights, witty banter, and suggestions for how the Civil War fight should have played out. I think you guys really nailed it when it came to the mythos and what actually happened. So, I'm glad to have been a part of that. I'm glad we brought to life that part of the film that was severely lacking. And
I think that drawing got lost in the metaverse.
That drawing was the whole thing.
well, see, that's the beauty of CGI and the beauty of Marvel films. We'll just retcon it. It's snapped. It's dusted. It's in my recycle bin now. There you go.
You're not gonna make a poster out of it? That could be a poster.
Maybe. I can always resurrect it too. There we go. Now it's back out of my recycling bin.
Yeah, dude, make it a thing.
Yeah. So, well, with all that being said, I am your patient zero, zombie JLT1.
I am Big Family Orphanage. I mean, Retro Ryan.
I happen to be here, Wackeroni.
Yes, our awesome guest, Wackeroni. Thank you for joining us, good sir. Love to talk more with you about any of this and more in our Discord, guys. So I will be opening that up in just a few minutes. Thanks again. Be sure to vote for next week's topic. I'll try to have those up as soon as possible. And don't be shy about submitting ideas in the Discord about some podcast topics that you would love to discuss with us. And if you're passionate about it, join us on the show. We can work that out. So thanks again, everybody. Hope to see you all in the Discord. If not, you all have a good night. And as always, enjoy that awesome ending. Take care, everybody.